Let's say I have this person I want to put on this background. What I would do is select both layers here in Bridge. And in Bridge, I can choose Tools, Photoshop, Load Files into Photoshop Layers. And that just means stack these images into a single document where I end up with one layer for each image. If you happen to not use Bridge, instead you use Lightroom, because Lightroom is a replacement for Bridge, you can go to the Photo menu. There's a choice called Edit In, and then you'll find a sub-menu called something like Load Files into Photoshop Layers, or it might be slightly different in name, but it does exactly the same thing. On occasion, it'll tell you that Photoshop is busy. Just tell it, yes, I want to queue this. And most of the time, Photoshop is not busy at all. It will just work. On occasion, I think Photoshop wants a break, but can be forced into doing work. Right? So then I'll do a quick and dirty selection here. And on this one, I think we might end up with an issue similar to what we had on the last image when it comes to decontaminate colors not helping. And so let's just see. Usually at this point when I make the selection, I'd usually hit Q and say how close is it to matching on everything that's not furry, fuzzy, and hairy. And if it doesn't match, fix it before we go in. I'll then go to the Select menu, choose Refine Edge, and I will initially start off with the on white setting, even if I want to put it on the other background, because I want to see where can I see the old background still showing up, and wherever it is I can see it, that's where I'm going to paint. You're not always certain if it's old background or not, but if it looks like it's blatantly old background, paint on it. Then, just like before, I'll change this to Overlay, and I'll look for parts of the hair that are covered in red that shouldn't be, and I'll come over here and give Photoshop control there. And I'm going to purposely mess up in one spot without telling you what I did, because oftentimes you'll mess up without knowing what you did. But I know that I just messed up in one part of my image because there is something that is going to make decontaminate colors not quite want to behave. Could have used a larger brush here, and I see little frizzy hairs going all the way out there. If you don't want to include the frizzy hairs, you're welcome to not paint on them, although it can make it so the rest of the hair doesn't quite look right, because then you're going to confuse Photoshop where it thinks I should delete these colors that are really the color of hair because you allowed the red to overlap them. I find it's best to deal with the frizzies afterwards, instead of just selectively not painting over those areas. So we got that. Now, let's go over here and choose On Layers. This is when we'll see it on the actual image that should be on the layer that's underneath. There we go. And it's really useful to do that because oftentimes if you view it on white or on black, you'll see issues that wouldn't truly be an issue on the actual background that you plan to put it on, and you're going to waste a lot of time fixing things that no one would ever notice the problem with. And so that's why it's kind of nice to be able to put it on another background. In this case, I see some colors over on the left side especially where it looks a little light compared to the background, and I think that's parts of the old background still showing up through the hair. And that's when I'm going to turn on Decontaminate Colors. And right away I noticed the color shift a little bit right over here. It was somewhat subtle though in that it just went a teeny bit brown. And I'll bring this up and see if I can get the hair to look appropriate. Okay. And I'm noticing one problem, and that is she's getting older in that her hair's turning gray at the top. And that's, you see right up in here. And that's because if you use Decontaminate Colors and you think about the way it works, it goes a little bit inside the image, grabs whatever color is there and pushes it out to the edge. Well, if you go a little bit inside the image there, you have her hair band, don't you? In her hairband, that color is not appropriate to push out into her hair. And so there we have an issue. There's a way to tell where we've painted, and I haven't shown you how to do that yet, but there is a, if we change this to the choice called overlay, and then we turn on this checkbox called show radius, that really means show where we painted. Okay, there's where we painted. That's where we're giving Photoshop permission to take control and do things. And I could look at that. That just indicates where we've painted and where we haven't. And first I noticed I never gave Photoshop control right here, and I could add some there. And then I noticed that right here, do you notice how we gave Photoshop control? It came all the way in and it touched her hairband. Well, I could come over here and grab the icon that's got the eraser and take away control and just leave a little gap between her hairband and where it started to get control. So that if Photoshop is going to come the littlest bit inside, what it's going to actually do is come the littlest bit inside this inner red. And whatever color's there, it's going to push out. Well, if we leave a little gap between where the edge of the red is and the stuff we don't want to have pushed out there, we might be able to prevent it from doing that. But to get this view, which is kind of a different view, what I did is I chose the choice in the preview that is called overlay, and I turned on a checkbox called show radius. And that's what allowed me to see it. And it can be a nice view to have, because now I can glance around here and see if there's any hairs that are extending beyond the, into that red stuff. I can see exactly where I'm giving Photoshop control. See if there's any, sometimes there'll be tiny little gaps that you didn't realize in there. Just look all the way around there. There's a couple hairs sticking out. A couple more right about there. That kind of stuff. To get out of that view, you can just turn off the show radius checkbox. Then you're back into just the red overlay view. And then if we wanted to see the end result, we could just change this to, again, on layers. And now let's see if that decontaminate colors is doing any better. I think it is, because I don't notice her having gray hair anymore. The reason why that we had gray hair is we let Photoshop have control all the way up into that hairband. So when it looked at the area where it didn't have control to grab colors and pushed it out, it was right on the hairband. Leaving a little gap where it didn't get control all the way to the hairband prevented that. So it's something to think about. Click OK. Since we had decontaminated colors turned on, it created the duplicate. That's the original underneath. So if we wanted to do that trick where we wanted to see if the original colors are better, you take this one and put it on top, and you clip it to what's underneath. So that means layer, create clipping mask. And now if I toggle this on and off, I'll see original colors versus decontaminate. Original, decontaminate. And so let's see if it's useful everywhere. And maybe I like the original colors more on the right side of the photograph. They look more realistic right in here than this, which looks somewhat out of focus and soft. So I end up turning that on, and I'll add a mask. If you add a mask, we'll be able to paint to control where this shows up. And if it's only in a small area, there's a trick that I use when adding a mask. Usually to add a mask, you click on the layer mask icon that's at the bottom of your layers panel. And that ends up with a mask that starts off with white. And a white mask allows that entire layer to show up to begin with. But here's the trick. If you hold down the Option key, Alt in Windows, when you click on the mask icon, watch what we get. Look at what color is in the mask. It starts off black. Black means hide. And therefore, it starts off hiding absolutely everything that's there. And therefore, I can just tell it where I need it to show up. So I only do that where I hold down the Option key when clicking the layer mask icon, when it's a small area that I want to keep from this layer. And so now I can come in here, just paint in that original color wherever I think it would look good. And I go up to the mask, hold Shift and click on it just to disable it, to say, is there any other areas? And I'll just glance there all the way around. And maybe I liked it better right there. Okay. All right, so we've been talking furry, fuzzy, and hairy. Remember, if we option click the mask, it looks like this might need some refining because that looks pretty sloppy. Remember, you can grab your paintbrush tool. If you set up those presets, then I can come in here and to fine tune this mask that looks a little sloppy to me, it might be a lot quicker because I don't have to remember how to set up my brush in hard mix at 20% opacity. Instead, I can dial it in just by going to my preset. If I want to somewhat clean it up. So furry, fuzzy, hairy, refine, edge is the start, but then there's all sorts of refinements we can do after it. Any questions, comments, or other things? Yeah.
So when you made the clipping mask
Yeah.
just now, could you have painted on the mask below it instead?
If I painted on the mask below it, it's going to hide or show more of the hair. Whereas when I clip it like this and I paint on the mask attached to the layer above, we're just controlling where is the original color used versus decontaminated color used. And it's not going to make the hair show up more or less anywhere. So it's different. The top mask is for color. The bottom mask is actually defining where the hair shows up. So not quite. Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you learned something.